Hey everyone, Darren here, and out of nowhere, Company of Heroes 3 was just announced with a cinematic trailer, and then they showed off a gameplay trailer, and then they opened up a pre-alpha where you can play the game right now for free until August 4th. So for those wondering how to join the alpha, you'll need to create an account over on companyofheroes.com and just follow the instructions there. You'll need to log into Steam and link your accounts, then the game's just automatically added to your Steam library and you can play it. It's very quick. So currently this is being dubbed as a pre-alpha preview, and what the developers are calling a co-development. Oh, see what they did there. Between them and the community, of course. They wanted to open up the game as early as possible to start getting feedback to help shape the game, and in some ways this is pretty cool, but in other ways it's kind of shows a bit of a lack of vision in my mind, especially to do it this early. The game isn't set to release until sometime in 2022. So we're not just talking about, refinement, balance, testing, we're really talking early development where significant changes can be made. So let's talk about the setting and the major differences between this and its predecessors. Company of Heroes 3 is set in and around the Mediterranean, with Italy being the focus for now and Africa being teased in the trailer. My guess is in the future we may also get Greece, maybe as a DLC or post-launch content, possibly depending on how the game goes. The big new addition is the campaign. It's turn-based, it's almost a sandbox, similar to a sort of basic Total War. You've got a small economy to manage how you kind of field your units, and when two companies meet on the campaign, you'll find out a traditional RTS battle. Now I say it's an almost sandbox because it does seem to have more linear objectives to kind of progress the campaign, and you can only play as the allies, and there's no multiplayer in the campaign, so it's very similar to Company of Heroes 2's Ardennes Assault, it's just a bit bigger. So in this campaign, you'll be playing as the British and the US forces, and for the campaign, they're actually combined together, which gives you a fairly diverse roster to work with. The Germans are the opposing faction, and it seems that the Italians are sort of partisan forces that kind of lend a hand to you based on certain objectives and capture points. They're not a traditional faction. I'll talk about the campaign in a little bit more detail later, but just to finish discussing what's new in the alpha, you can also play a randomized skirmish match, just a 1v1, and you actually can't choose who you're playing as. You'll be given either the British or the US forces, so you can just quit out, go back in if you want to change sides, I guess. And there doesn't seem to be a commander system, you're just kind of given a set of commander perks. There's also no difficulty setting at the moment. Now, in the skirmish, there's a couple set pieces that will happen, such as munitions may get dropped on the map that you have to collect as a side objective, but overall, the general objective is just to take all the sectors to force your opponent to capitulate. The big new features when you're actually in battle is the new tactical pause, so it's of course a single player only feature. It basically lets you pause the game and queue up the orders if you want, and then just kind of let it all play out. Great for people who are new to the series or people that just get overwhelmed in an RTS experience. In the heat of the moment, you want to read some tooltips, figure out what's going on. Now you can just pause it, queue it all up, and then let it play out. So that's a great newcomer feature, I would say, or just someone who's maybe a little bit more casual that wants to get to grips with the game. Obviously, for multiplayer, it's non-existent, and for veterans, I would say, of the series, probably never going to use it. You've also got the new ability of breaching buildings, which allows you to just flush out a garrisoned unit. It's basically a unit ability. I'll throw a grenade in there, costs you some munitions, and it empties the building for you. Other than that, I actually don't think there's anything else that's like a new feature or mechanic. But there is also some quality of life improvements over Company of Heroes 2, such as units will display their path to their objective on the radar. So now at least you know exactly the kind of route they're going to take, because sometimes it'd be a little finicky before. They might go away, you weren't really planning, run into an MG nest or something like that. Now at least you'll know if they're going to do that, if you're paying attention. Units are going to automatically vault over walls. This is quite nice as well. It kind of saves a couple clicks, so that's good. And there's now a kind of a line of sight error that will sort of show you why your tank isn't firing. It's going to point towards the thing that's blocking its line of sight, so you can clearly see why it's not firing, so that's kind of nice too. Bizarrely, there's no key rebinding yet in the game, and there's very little graphical options. Company of Heroes 2 was known for this as well. Seems to just be carrying over, I guess. The game visually looks a little bit better than Company of Heroes 2, with increased texture details and ragdoll physics, though it's obviously quite early, without any post-processing yet, and some very odd lighting and animations, as you'd expect. What I didn't expect was the just copious amounts of reused icons and art from Company of Heroes 2, which is just all over the UI at this point. So, just to report on the battle side of things, it's a little bit disappointing to me. You can probably gather that by the way I've been talking about it so far. And yes, I know it's just an alpha, and it's obviously free to try right now. But what's disappointing is the fact that it's been 8 years since Company of Heroes 2, and I still regularly play it in multiplayer. I'd say I play it every week. I play with the British, Soviets, OKW, and the US, and as someone who would be interested in multiplayer, the only features to get excited for is breaching. Less factions? You know, it's a bit of a tough sell. The marketing is pushing more vertical levels and new destruction, which is, from what I've seen, doesn't look as good as Company of Heroes 2's destruction. I mean, things seem to break apart like cardboard. It almost looks voxel based, you know, everything just shatters into loads of little bits. And it just, you know, doesn't really look as detailed as it did in COH2. At least not yet. I thought playing as Italy could be quite cool, but they're not in the game. At least not as a traditional faction. Obviously, the campaign is the real big addition, and clearly a lot of work has gone into that. And RTS and strategy is just such a dead genre right now. I'm going to take anything of quality here. But I guess I was just hoping for a bit more of a leap forward for the battles, you know, the core gameplay. Maybe an increased scale, or even possibly a different era. I would have been personally very happy with something like Modern Combat. There's a very popular mod for Company of Heroes 1 that focused on Modern Combat. It even has its own Steam page. And I feel like we just haven't had a good Modern Combat RTS for many years. Call to Arms is pretty close, but it's a bit more tactical. You know, you can choose individual soldiers and go into first person and stuff. I'm thinking more along the lines of like a World in Conflict. Knowing that Relic are deep into the development of Age of Empires 4, I just can't help but feel like this doesn't have their full attention, and it feels a little bit like a minor upgrade, at least for the core gameplay. Now, maybe my expectations are out of whack. You know, I'm interested to hear what you think. They have obviously clearly focused a lot of their energy on the campaign, and it's going to take a little bit of time to really tell if that's a good thing or not, if it's going to be that dynamic, and how long is it going to really last? Will it be that interesting? Not everything's been added in yet, so we just don't have all that information yet, but it's got a lot of potential, and as I said, there's not much competition in the RTS campaign space right now, so I'm just happy to see anything there, really. In many ways, this campaign seems very similar to Army General from Steel Division, which I highly recommend, by the way. While streaming this alpha, a lot of people were mentioning to me that they wanted to see increased realism, and they were disappointed they didn't see that in Company of Heroes. And to me, this has always been a fairly arcadey, multiplayer-focused RTS game, and that's how I've always seen it. I just typically always play the multiplayer. But if you crave that realism and massive scale and turn-based campaigns with real-time battles, I mean, Steel Division 2 is the game to get for sure. This is almost like the Call of Duty of World War II RTS games. It's fast, it's not realistic, it's over-the-top action in a very small space. But it's got good multiplayer. And Company of Heroes 2, which is like 95% off on Steam right now, still gets its balance passes and has a very active player base. Somewhere in the realm of like 8,000 people are always just concurrently playing it. So you'll get games, and with the workshop, there's hundreds of great maps to play, and the AI, against the AI or with friends. Anyways, I digress. Back to the campaign. How it basically works is you're invading Italy, and you choose a US focus, a British focus, or a combined arms effort. Then you'll deploy companies and detachments. Now, companies are like the units that you move around on the map and will trigger RTS battles when they fight other companies. Detachments are almost like single specialized units, like a mortar or a heavy MG that can capture enemy towns on their own if they're empty, and do some damage to companies if they manage to kind of catch them off guard, but they don't actually fight out their battles. They're just like minor units traveling around. And they actually act as a sort of modifier. If you then attach them to a company, like a medic detachment will give passive bonuses to healing if it's added to the company during the campaign. Others can actually give battle effects and one-time use abilities as well. So basically, the campaign mirrors a regular RTS battle in many ways. You've got your global manpower, munitions, and fuel. and these are used to recruit companies and detachments from recruitment towns. Now, various other towns will grant an increase to those resources per turn, as well as unique call-in abilities like capturing an airfield that will allow you to recon parts of the map or to bomb it or whatever. The same can be said for ports and navies. You can use navies to bombard coastal towns or as far inland as they can get. Stringing several towns together also gives you supply bonuses, increasing your resources, and I assume having them cut off will then isolate and maybe cause other issues. I actually didn't have it happen, so I can't fully report on that. Companies also have a progression to them. As you win battles, they'll gain XP and veterancy, and you can specialize them then with various perks and abilities, some that are active, some that are passive, and during battles you can then use these call-ins when you reach the appropriate command point tier. So, a lot of information there, but just as a recap, companies are like the armies that will trigger battles. They're recruited from towns and come pre-built with their own specializations. If you want, you can add up to 3 detachments, which are like just units, to improve its fighting on both the campaign or battle. And in the battle, you just play a normal game, but depending on the type of company and how you've ranked it up, that gives you access to different things. But your resource meters and everything like that, that's just all pretty standard. The last thing worth mentioning on the campaign is that detachments can actually do things like lay mines or build tank traps, and subsequently different detachments can then remove them or do other special things like healing units. So the campaign is certainly quite interesting with its approach to this kind of duality of both minor and major units that will and will not trigger battles. My main feedback for something like this campaign would be just please make it multiplayer. I mean, and make it like a true sandbox to allow you to play both sides. Steel Division does this, and it's great. I'd also love for it to allow for proper multiplayer campaigns. So start a scenario where it's almost like 50-50 or something. Either co-op to do it together if you want to go against the majority, or head-to-head if you want to have a scenario where, you know, the allies have already established a beachhead, as it were. That would truly add a new element to the multiplayer scene, especially for those who maybe are into multiplayer, but they don't necessarily want to get into climbing the ranked ladders or, you know, trying to show off on the leaderboards, but just want something more challenging than an AI. Anyways, that's kind of all I have time for with Company of Heroes. I wish I could do a little bit more with it, but I'm actually traveling home to Ireland this week for personal reasons, and it happened quite suddenly, so unfortunately, I won't be able to play more Company of Heroes until I get back, but if people like this video and want to see more, I'd love to do some stuff on COH2 and then COH3 following it up before the pre-alpha ends in August 4th. Just let me know in the comments. That's all from me, and I'll see you in the next one. There's no one in the plane? Hey guys, thank you very much for watching, and remember, if you want to support this series directly, you can click the join button to become a channel member. Doing so will get your name in the credits, as well as loyalty badges and emotes to use in the comments. If you don't see the join button, it means the video has been copyright claimed, but you can still join from the channel page on desktop. You can also link your account to our Discord to get a special role on there that will give you access to the Senate House and a few other perks.